Welcome on in. This is the RotoWire Fantasy Football Podcast for NFL Week 8. A full slate of games, no buys this week after something of a buy-mageddon last week. So full slate to unpack here. Let's start the show. Welcome on in. This is the RotoWire Fantasy Football Podcast for NFL Week 8. I'm your host, John McKechnie. That is Mario Puig. Mario, how are we doing on this fine Thursday here?
Okay. It's awfully rainy and gray here, so I had to have this glare-causing ceiling fan light on in today's broadcast, whereas normally I would not. But it was only the light of my computer screen before I turned it on, and I figured, I get made fun of more than usual if I looked quite that way. What about you?
I think you look tremendous. Let's see.
Thanks, John.
No
I'm wearing my new Venture Brothers shirt.
Let's see it.
That's just Hank. There's two more disguises that he's in on the shirt. But yeah, first, this is a once a year kind of thing for me at most. New shirt.
I love it. The new Mario wardrobe is looking sharp. You're 1 for 1. You're batting 1,000, and you know what? That's what counts, brother. So love that. Doing all right over here. I mean, getting kind of excited for the weekend on the college end. This is always the weekend that Georgia and Florida play each other. So that's always a big rivalry game. Excited for that. But other than that, I mean, I'm stoked for this week of games. We got some interesting matchups, to say the least. I'm really looking forward to Jags Steelers, but a bunch of other highlights on this slate. So why don't we get a move on, get started unpacking this one. We got the Bills playing host to the Buccaneers tonight. And there's been some kind of interesting line movement here where the Bills were like 7.5-point favorites for a good chunk of the week, like Tuesday into Wednesday. And now it's ballooned up to like 8.5, 9.5 over at BetMGM. And the reports are such that, Baker Mayfield and Chris Godwin are expected to play. So I'm a little bit confused by that. And also, the Bills just have had 2 weeks in a row in which they were extremely heavy favorites and failed to cover in both of them, even losing outright to the Patriots last week. So is it that the Bills kind of have this, they've established this binary, right? Where they either come out and just crush, or they look like a completely, stilted, unserious outfit. Like they look real clunky sometimes, like last week and against the Giants. So what do we expect here on the short week against the Bucs?
Well, I guess it's possible that the Mayfield Godwin injuries still, matter, maybe limit them a little bit, even if they do play. I noticed Vita Vea has not practiced. I forgot to check if he's been out or something, but if him being out were something new, maybe that would be pertinent here, because no practice this week. And if he's out, their whole run defense goes from, it probably just goes straight to bad, or at least something below average. Whereas when he's out there, they can be pretty tough, especially if you don't have a bigger group of personnel on the interior offensive line. Maybe the return of Ed Oliver is a big part of it, specifically because I guess it's I haven't watched the Tampa offensive line closely at all, but I would guess it's the interior that's the question there, because they used to have Jensen at center, and that Gedicke that they got from whatever Central Michigan or whatever doesn't seem that great. I don't know. Maybe there's some development there. I'm not sure, but otherwise, this could be one of those things. I don't know. Maybe McDermott has a good history against schemes such as what the Buccaneers tend to run, or I don't remember what reason there could be, but I could imagine if Todd Bowles gets out coached on defense the way that he did against the Lions. Ben Johnson kind of had Jared Goff in really low difficulty settings all game, even though the Buccaneers have pretty strong personnel at a couple points of their defense, and maybe their tendency to run a certain type of coverage means Diggs is going to get hot in this game. And like you were saying, There's either the kind of they're going nuts version of the Bills offense or they're struggling version of the Bills offense. And to me, it seems entirely to hinge on the basis of how many yards did Diggs get? Because if he's held to even something like 80 or less, things start to go really, not completely wrong necessarily, but difficult. It's noticeably more difficult for the Bills offense. They start having to kind of grind out good plays and first downs, whereas when Diggs is over 120 or something like that, it's kind of just all rolling because the defense never gets onto the beat with Diggs. And as they're trying to chase Diggs and slow him down, futilely, they kind of cut loose everything else too, be it Josh Allen as a runner or, Gabe Davis or the tight ends, whatever. So getting to that like 100 plus for Diggs seems like the pretty crucial question. And I think it's like, as long as he does get there, then double digit point win is on the table for the Bills. And yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's asking a lot, but particularly if the Buccaneers try to do like press man coverage on Diggs, if they try to like if Carlton Davis wants to shadow Diggs and they put Davis on Diggs without enough help and doing too much press man, then it could go really wrong, because that's sort of like a similar genre of error that Bowles made against the Chiefs when Tyreek Hill had like 270 yards in the first half. Like they slowed down in the second half because they stopped trying to do press man against him, which, shouldn't have done it in the first place, but they did. So maybe some kind of press man tendency in Bowles's, defensive inclinations kind of cuts loose Diggs here.
Digging back into the 2020 the Bucs Super Bowl season. I do distinctly remember that game because Tyreek was just on another planet in that one. When it comes to Stephon Diggs tonight, I do feel like I'm a little bit standing on your corner here because you're really locked in with the corner and like safety matchups and everything. And I did kind of notice that the Buccaneers, their corner personnel has not played overly or particularly well this year. Carlton Davis has been solid, but like Jamel Dean seems to have been getting lit up a lot this year. So if the Bills can kind of draw on some matchups to get Diggs isolated over there, then that could definitely be a problem for the Buccaneers. And I think another kind of big element for fantasy that this week is a lot of people expecting Dalton Kincaid to break out. Obviously had the good game last week, but I do also feel like the Buccaneers, the strength of their secondary is at the safety spot, and they obviously have linebackers that are pretty good in coverage as well. So I'm pumping the brakes on Kincaid having like another repeat, 75-yard type of outing tonight. And I noticed that he's not drawing targets at a particularly high rate on his routes run. Obviously that could change with Knox being out, but then additionally, his ADOT, he's supposed to be this field stretcher, and it's like under 4 yards. So I don't know if they're going to change his role on the fly or what. But even if he gets more targets, like it could be short area, and the Bucs are pretty good at tackling in the open field. So I'm a little bit dubious on a Kincaid breakout tonight.
Well, it definitely helps that Knox is out, and a big part of the whole issue with Kincaid as a theory of a first round pick for the Bills was like, you need to move Knox now to make to give Kincaid a fair shot of returning the value that you're kind of, putting on him here. And that's not really fair to either player really, but to have, Knox out of the picture at least makes Kincaid make a little more sense because he's getting 55 snaps now. He can draw 8 targets on 55 snaps. And if especially if he's getting some of those play action, what would you call it, like corner routes in the red zone that Knox would score his touchdowns on, those kinds of plays, like you get Kincaid, all that stuff, it's going to make the defense defend a little differently than they do when Knox is running those plays, because Kincaid is a more dangerous pass catcher. It's just the trade-off is that Knox is a better blocker in the run game, especially. And I think that talked about this a lot, like Josh Allen, when he falls apart, it's in those scenarios where incidentally Diggs is under 120. But I think the kind of, the cause of that outcome is basically that you're not allowing Allen to express his arm strength over enough of this field. And you spread the defense thinner when you make them cover more of the field. And Kincaid, it's like he's running in the area where everything gets jammed in the first place. It's like everything starts to clutter up and just like collapse when Diggs is bracketed and like everybody else at that point is just like, at best, it's like a broken play kind of thing, and they improvise on the fly. So I feel like if they're going to keep running Gabe Davis where he is, which is to say too far downfield for his speed, then I think they kind of put that constricting effect on themselves either way, regardless of whether it's Knox or Kincaid on the field. And to me, the trade-off in the run game is kind of just a zero-sum issue. It's like you needed more of a sum, not like not more or not diverting more tight end usage to a share of the offense. So I think he's fine for fantasy, but like you said, these targets are pretty low quality. And if he's getting more to what he would have been at Utah, which I don't know, probably like 11 average depth of target, something like that, that catch rate would drop a lot. It's going to drop a lot anyway. You might have noticed he's catching 92.6% of his targets. That's going to drop to at least something like 77 by the time the year is over. So if they want to increase his depth of target, it's going to come at the expense of, we're going to see a spree of incomplete passes eventually.
Right. So that then, Allen can get off rhythm or lose a little bit of that trust in Kincaid. So yeah, I'll be monitoring that development closely. And then last thing on the Bucs side, their run game basically is non-existent.
Disgusting.
Yeah, it's pathetic. But beyond that, I mean, do you think that with Tre'Davious White being out for the season, obviously that anything gets cooking in any significant way for one Mike Evans or Chris Godwin?
Yeah, without specifically, I'm not trying to endorse the Tampa covers line. I have no opinion either way, but the Bills definitely have corner issues, and I feel like those corner, like Benford, he should not be your starter. And I'm not saying that Elam is definitely better than Benford, but if Elam is not better than Benford, you might as well kind of get rid of both of them and find a third player, because yeah, it's like them. I don't even know what's up. I know Dane Jackson got hurt a little bit, so he's like one of the guys they've counted on for stepping up wherever they kind of need him. And if it's like he's playing at least. Teron Johnson in the slot is tough. He's kind of like an all-purpose defender there. The outside coverage is pretty weak, and Benford, Elam, Dane Jackson, I don't think any of them can run with Godwin, assuming he's healthy, and Evans is he's still getting open so much for his age. It's bizarre. Like I mentioned in probably the last podcast, it's weird that as he ages, the usual concern is like, oh, he's not going to separate anymore. He's not going to draw targets. He's not going to be able to get downfield, whatever. And Evans is doing all that stuff, and then he's dropping passes that he never did before. So he will either apparently have this newfound problem of catching passes from this point, or he'll revert to the type of before, which is at least decent hands. And if he's making those plays and he's getting that separation, he should be a problem for these corners. I guess it's the question is, particularly if Godwin's limited, particularly if Mayfield's limited, and particularly if the Bills just sell out to stop Evans, can the Buccaneers do a single other thing at that point? And I'm kind of worried the answer, for them, I'm worried the answer is no, because what's it going to be like? Cade Otton, the run game? No,
we need to get Raheem Jarrett in there. That's what we need.
Yeah, do something. Even Palmer, like what they should do, they should have Jarrett and Palmer running from the outside and move Godwin back into the slot. I mean, I know in this matchup, Teron Johnson's there, but part of what they've done is make things harder on themselves by having Godwin run further from the quarterback, and they're giving the slot reps to guys like Palmer, who should be doing more like distance running.
I root for Devin Tompkins because he's a small king, but I'm as a Maryland slappy, I'd much prefer to see Raheem Jarrett out there.
Yeah, get some speed on the field. If you're not going to get the ball to the player who's taking that rep, if they're not moving the ball for you, at least make the defense chase somebody else.
See, exactly. It doesn't have to be that hard. Before we get on to the Sunday slate, we got a message from our friends over at Circa. Get ready for the ultimate big game parties at Circa Resort and Casino. Super Sunday is in Las Vegas this year. Watch the big game poolside at Stadium Swim's big game viewing party. Massive screen, booming game sound, and a view of the pyrotechnic and visual effects throughout the game. Snag the best seat in the sun with day beds, poolside boxes, cabanas, and more, or touchdown at the world's largest sportsbook. Circa Sports for the Big Game Bash. 3 stories of football glory featuring a 78 million pixel screen. I got to get my pixels up. I'm nowhere in that stratosphere as of this moment. Book your seat with a variety of reservation options, including bottle service, open bar, stadium-style food, and more. Mario, I know you're a big bottle service guy. Don't miss these legendary viewing experiences on February 11th, the big game parties only at Circa Resort and Casino. Reserve today at circalasvegas.com. We also got a message from our friends over at Blue Wire. And wouldn't you know it, we're on to Sunday. Texans, Panthers, a matchup of the top 2 picks in this most recent draft. We got Bryce Young and we've got CJ Stroud. Both these teams coming off of a bye, I believe. Let's see. The Texans are 3-point favorites on the road in this one. I can't see the Texans screwing this one up.
No, it would be, to me at least, it would be very confusing if they managed to do that. It's one of those things, like the Panthers probably aren't as bad. Bryce Young maybe is not as bad as he has looked at his worst points, but even like the little flickers of competitiveness for the Panthers have been short-lived. It's like they kind of kept pace with the Dolphins for a little bit, and I was like, oh, looks like the Panthers got something cooking here, and then they didn't score a point in the second half. And of course, in hindsight too, it's like, well, the Dolphins defense kind of sucks, so who cares? If it wasn't for Vic Fangio doing all the smoke and mirrors, like the Dolphins might have as bad of a defense as a team like Arizona or whatever else. So I think there's still reason for kind of like default pessimism with every part of the Panthers offense, aside from maybe the running back, but more so Thielen. And Thielen is pretty interesting to me. I think he quite simply can play still. And the only issue that he ever had before that he was with Minnesota was they were lining him up too much outside, giving too many of the slot routes, which is largely to say easier routes, to KJ Osborne, who still didn't do anything with them. And I think what Thielen is doing with the Panthers is kind of just an example of what he could have been doing in Minnesota if they just said, all right, you've lost a step clearly, but you're not the slowest guy out here, and you know how to run routes. You don't need your speed to separate, at least on simple routes that we might have you run from the slot. And it's one of those things, like, you can try to double him in the slot. It's hard to do that before something like 6 or 7 yards, and he's kind of getting open these really easy routes, and Young can't get the ball to anyone else. So it seems to me like Thielen should kind of just stay hot all year. And it doesn't require a good game from Bryce Young for it to happen. Bryce Young only needs to throw for something like 150 yards for Thielen to project for something like 70. So he should be fine. But yeah, Chuba Hubbard, I don't know if I believe in earnest that he's better than Miles Sanders. Like he's shown enough, and Miles Sanders has shown little enough to make it a fair question. But even if Hubbard or Sanders or whoever is able to do play something other than awful, I just don't know if it's a great matchup for it to show up here. Because I don't know. I think that the Texans defense should be trending toward better over the course of the year, especially as they get healthier. And the Panthers defense, the way Stroud and the receivers, the slow passing game are working, they should be able to score, and they should be able to put the Panthers in the difficult position of more or less abandoning the run to try to play catch up. They in that situation can either stay with their base offense and sort of look like they are quitting, which they pretty much would be to do that, or they can put Young in a more difficult situation and try to win. And the more difficult you make the situation with Young, it doesn't seem like he has the margin to withstand that kind of thing.
No, he's definitely not there yet. We'll see if he does eventually get there. Interesting point on the Carolina backfield. And I think Houston kind of has a similar issue brewing, where Dameon Pierce has been a dud this year.
Yeah,
he's we're talking about 2.9 yards per carry. It's great that he has almost 100 carries through 6 games, but just 1 touchdown. Probably not doing a ton in the receiving game either. So Devin Singletary, it's not like he's been great either, but he has been a full yard per carry more effective on a smaller sample, of course, again. But I do wonder if we start to see Houston go with like more of a true committee, whereas the theory with Pierce all the way was like who's going to be taking carries from him.
Yeah, and I mean, I still just kind of as the nature of my process, I'm still forced to believe that Pierce is probably good, but it's getting more difficult to stand by the week. And of course, each time that Pierce fails, that Singletary does better. It's particularly damning. So I still think Pierce has something, and I wouldn't be shocked if it's kind of like he's been playing a little bit nicked up or something, but it's definitely getting to the point where it's difficult to stand by it. And I don't know, it like uh, the timer is definitely going, and I would, if I had to call it, I would say I still think Pierce gets going better, but he doesn't have long.
Yeah, but I have him on my NFFC team, and I've been using him in the flex. This week is put up or shut up in my locker room.
If it's not here, yeah, it pretty much has to be here. So if it isn't, that's pretty bad.
Yes, it would be. So keeping a close eye there. Let's get on over to Dallas. We got the Rams and the Cowboys. Why do I like the Rams so much in this spot? The Rams are getting 6.5.
That is a lot of points.
It is a lot of points.
Yeah, I was gonna guess it was like, I don't know, 2.5, 3.5, something like that. But
maybe at most 4.5.
Yeah, so I'm having trouble anticipating everything that's gone into it. I guess it could just be as simple as the observation that Mike McCarthy's like a total dodo, and McVay, despite his imbalanced traits, he's very good at scheming on offense, and the passing game tends to be pretty close to like pass rush proof. It's just I guess I don't know if it's deliberately part of McVay's adjustment to a subpar offensive line, or if it's more just this is how he was going to run it anyway. But Kupp and Nakua, they get high volume usage quickly, and they don't require even like 5-step drops. So you just get the ball quickly to them. It's happening over and over. There's no reason to think it'll slow down here. And if Dallas's pass rush can't manifest on the field, then you're very quickly to the point like, well, what does Dallas even do well anymore? And it's, if you can remove that part of their effect from like the game calculus, you're making Mike McCarthy and his judgment as an offensive handler take up a bigger part of the formula. And that's got to be the goal when you're going against Dallas. Make that pass rush not show up and make McCarthy win the game for them, and reduce Dan Quinn's effect in general. And that's something that I McVay is probably prepared to make that happen. And if it does happen, Dallas is just toast right off the bat. So I don't know if we should be on watch for like a big win from the Rams. I still feel like it would be hard to completely remove Quinn's effect. It's like maybe Kupp and Nakua both have big games. Maybe Stafford goes over 300 yards, but I would still expect, Stafford's, it's part of it that maybe that they put so much on him, but he's still somewhat turnover prone for whatever reason there is. And I have to believe going against Dallas, it's like your odds of having a turnover go up, even if you're doing everything right. So I don't want to just make it sound like Dallas can't make it a close game, but with their offense looking like it has this year, I don't know if they can really catch up with anybody, like unless the defense starts going prevent, which the Rams seem to be doing a great job calling their defense. I don't know how they're getting the results that they do. Their corner personnel is not one of the like 20 best corner rotations in the league.
No,
it's pretty bad. And yet they're getting good results. I have no idea why, it would fall apart here. And I feel like a defense kind of has to fall apart or at least get repeatedly left in really difficult situations for the Dallas offense to look in control ever.
Yeah, the Rams were on the receiving end of some bad calls, I thought, towards the end of that game as far as their secondary was concerned.
It's really cool how you could say that about like almost every game now. It's like the product is crap in general, and then we have ref ball variable too. It's like let's add some fun wacky twists to it now, and it's how it works every time. It's cool. The
Steelers getting the home cooking treatment out in Los Angeles. that's concerning when the Rams now have to go to Dallas. But we'll see. And then on the question of the Rams backfield, what were your takeaways from last week, where obviously the Zach Evans investors enjoyed a significant rug pull?
And Myles Gaskin investors like me, John.
I think I got it wrong too.
Well, look, Darrell Henderson is not good, and it's the mere fact that Sean McVay thought it was a good idea to call up Darrell Henderson and give him the start is a reason to believe Darrell Henderson is like irrevocably awful. It's incredible how wrong Sean McVay is about absolutely everything that he thinks about running backs. And the Henderson thing is no exception. It's like, Sean, you cut this guy last year in the middle of the season. And then the next team that claimed him off waivers cut him because he showed up too fat to practice. And now going into the season where you have this guy, Zach Evans, who you at once drafted and now say you can't play, you still made no effort up to this point to have Darrell Henderson on your team. So how do you now square all of those points with apparently your new earnest belief he's the best starting option? Because you didn't seem to believe that at any point in time before this. It seems incoherent to me. It seems arbitrary. I don't know. Maybe it's like he's dismissively handling it and not bothering to think it through. I don't know, but there's no basis for it, so we can't assume anything in particular about McVay. I guess we assume by default that Henderson keeps being the guy, but I think McVay is capable of concluding almost anything. It seems like he kind of goes on whims, making his running back decisions, and Royce Freeman was more effective in that game. So I can see Royce Freeman kind of encroaching on this. I feel like Royce Freeman should be in that. If he's going to run like that, why don't you just have him on the offense even when Kyren Williams is back? Like Kyren Williams is like a 30. If we're talking baseball scouting system, he's like a 35 grade runner. It's incredible how bad of a runner Kyren Williams is. And yet they have all this usage for him. It's like Royce Freeman can pick up the blitz. He can catch a pass. That's what he did in Denver before he kind of got washed out for some other guys who they wanted to feature in those formations. And he's built like a fullback. He can do some meaningful reps back there and give you an element that he's much bigger. He's like 35 pounds heavier than Kyren Williams, maybe even 40, and he's still a lot faster in the 40. He's like 0.15 or something seconds faster in the 40 at 40 pounds heavier. Just keep Freeman out there. So if it's anyone other than Henderson, it seems like it's going to be Freeman, but McVay can totally change his mind. He can invert it week to week. It's nothing for him to do that.
Yeah, exactly. We've seen it before. So chasing the Rams backfield tends to be a fool's errand, unless earlier in the season when you had the Kyren Williams monopoly, where it's like there's that sweet disconnect of reality versus fantasy. But for fantasy, Kyren Williams was obviously very useful. Let's see. Let's get on over to the NFC North. We've got the Vikings going to Lambeau Field to play the Packers. We've got looks like kind of split action depending on which book you're looking at. The Vikings 1-point dogs on the road over at BetMGM, but the Packers are 1.5-point home dogs over at FanDuel. So do some line shopping if you're interested in placing a wager on this game. But your thoughts on this matchup here, where the Packers are coming off pretty tough Sunday over in Denver, whereas the Vikings, I mean, hey, is there a pulse here?
I guess so. One thing I don't know from that 49ers game is like how much was Minnesota succeeding, and specifically, were they succeeding because they did something differently or something better than they usually do? Or were the 49ers just kind of being a letdown in that game? And, even as well as it turned out, even though you can probably say something like this is the best Kirk Cousins has played, I don't know, this year at least, and maybe even going back a couple of years, the whole result would have been a lot different if Charvarius Ward just intercepted that pass that Addison took for the touchdown. And Ward pretty much should have made that play. We're not taking away credit from Addison to observe something like that. It's like Addison made a crazy, Addison made the kind of play that really only happens for intangible star quality reasons. Like it's just, it's because he's that real of a deal that it happened. But Ward should have still intercepted that pass.
It's like something that Antonio Brown would have done in his prime.
It is Antonio Brown stuff very specifically, yeah. And Charvarius Ward's got like 40 pounds on him, and he can't wrestle that ball away. If it's anyone other than very few receivers anyway make that play, and if it was a different result, the whole structure, the whole script of that game flips for the worse for the Vikings, and then we maybe would have seen the bad Kirk Cousins come out as the pressure gets way higher on him. But it's a great showing, and it's specifically it's a big deal for the Vikings offense, because up until that game, in fact, you saw kind of the bad version of it against the Bears the week before that. If they don't get Addison to 100 yards, their offense is just crap. It's a nonsense proposition to say the Vikings have a good game on offense if Addison doesn't get to 100, because they were so dependent on Justin Jefferson, not just for 100, but like 150, 180 every single week, while all these other pass catchers, including TJ Hawkinson, gave them negative returns for their targets, no matter what the target volume was. So if Addison doesn't do the Justin Jefferson imitation and lift up the rest of that crap offense, it's a silly thing to suggest that they would have enough yardage to compete most weeks. So at the one hand, I'm super big Addison fan. It's not difficult for me to imagine him staying red hot. Like I don't see any reason why he shouldn't be a top 12 fantasy receiver as long as Jefferson's out. Like I don't see the reason why it shouldn't be the case. But if he doesn't reach that sort of altitude, the Vikings just become a bad offense again. And I know the Packers pretty much suck, but I guess I still think that the Vikings pretty much do also. And, even though the 49ers, especially 2 weeks ago, would have been regarded as the best team in the league, they're a very weak best team in the league relative to most years, So I think wins and losses don't mean quite as much as usual on a, it's not like we can conclude like the Vikings are X good because they beat the team, that was Y good. It's just kind of, there's a lot of noise and chaos, and anybody can lose to almost any team, and the Vikings are just way too sloppy to be given like a reliable benefit of the doubt, in my opinion.
Well, as risky as it might be, I think I am going to trust them in this spot. I think the Packers are deader than
disco. Yeah, they're bad. Yeah, they're crap.
I think that Jordan Love isn't playing well, but I think also that the offense seems to have gotten stale, and like the wunderkind
because of him,
blues off the rose. Oh, you think so?
I really think he's even when things were when the ball was bouncing the right way for them in their good games, when you were watching, it still felt like you were watching like a spring practice or something. It's like this is not a real offense. Like this doesn't look like anybody knows what they're doing, and I think it's because there is no correct way to do it. Really, it's like you can't make a Jordan Love offense work, so it's just everyone's gonna look a little bit out of place from time to time because it's just doomed from the start. And if you're out there, you can only look so good. But in this case, yeah, if the Vikings are gonna lose, it has to come down to like bad Kirk Cousins showing up, or I don't know, maybe Jair Alexander gets over his back injury and just starts going nuts. Maybe Rashawn Gary takes over the game, something like that. That's pretty much what it would require, because banking on Jordan Love to do anything at all, I mean, it's like even if you dial up these wide open downfield shots, like he misses those. And if you're a low volume passer, you have to be able to make those downfield big throws, because it's the only theoretical shot that you have to do any lifting at all. It's like if you're going to be a game manager quarterback, then you need to make your wide open 3-point shots, or else the math just doesn't go. So yeah, not because I think the Packers are good or have anything to work with there, but yeah, maybe divisional opponent, low scoring, weird anomalous outcome kind of thing gives the Packers a shot here. However, I want to mention it's crazy that the Packers need to bench Jordan Love and absolutely cannot, because Sean Clifford, if you want to make Jordan Love look good, by all means, put Sean Clifford on the field. It's not going to last more than a couple drives.
Wait a second. Is that like a thing that people are talking about up there?
Well, no, but it's in any other situation, it's like if the Packers had a Jacoby Brissett, if it was a Howell Brissett situation, I don't think there's any question that Brissett would have been out there already. But because it's Sean Clifford, who may be the worst quarterback in, it's certainly to be drafted kind of
I
ever.
was surprised he got drafted. Yeah.
Getting drafted is insane in the 5th round. It's just crazy. Absolutely wild. Worst quarterback probably ever drafted, and probably the worst quarterback in the NFL right now. So even if Jordan Love's the second worst quarterback in the entire league, I don't think the Packers can. It's like Alex Mago is clearly better than Sean Clifford. It's a joke to suggest otherwise. So if that guy's still on speed dial around their practice squad or whatever, then I could see the Packers benching Love for him. But if they put Clifford on the field, it's just going to be a joke.
Another draft failure, by
that guy.
But well, yes, but the Rams, the Packers should have taken Stetson Bennett, is what I'm saying.
They should have took Stetson Bennett. They should have took Tyson Bagent. Anybody else.
Yeah, literally. So that's ugly. One last thing that I kind of took away or two things. One, if you're in a deep league, I'm going to ask you about this. Is Brandon Powell maybe like a flex option?
Let me see. He had a couple good plays in the game against the 49ers.
We were talking offline during that, and I was like, Brandon Powell looks kind of good, and you're like, no, he definitely has looked solid tonight. I just can't get over the fact that he's been literally terrible since his entire college career, and it's like, well.
Oh yeah, man,
he's
been elite. He's been out of college for a long time too. He was like the class of 2018, and he's kind of just done nothing except that one game and maybe a couple good plays. It was whatever the game was before the Bears. It's one of those things, John, where even when I'm at my most critical about any given player, Sean Clifford aside, I mean to have like the implicit concession that they can make some good plays. I mean, even the absolute worst NFL players can make a good play or be on like the receiving end of a vaguely good outcome in a play. It's just that what makes a bad player is not a player who never does that, although a player who never does it ever is certainly in that category. But it's can you do it enough, and can you do it in structure, and can you do it as your sample size increases? And if you start to fall apart the bigger the sample gets, then you're kind of just you made the play the time that you were asked to step up, and that's great, big personal accomplishment. But from the lens of like talent evaluation, still a bad player if they can't do it again and again. And I think in Powell's case, we have reason to worry that he can't. But, with that said, if he somehow keeps playing that way, then the results will keep being good. It's just, he would be a weird case for such a late in this career change in nature, especially since he's not even fast. Like, he's small and slow. He ran like a 4.6 at 180 or something like that. Awful production at Florida. So it would just be a very weird thing to me if he managed to string together a spree of good performances, but they have no one else or are not willing to put anyone else on the field. So seems like he'll get a shot at least.
Right. So basically the way that I'm framing it in my mind, like this week, probably, not worth even rostering because everyone's in action this week. But like week 9, there's a lot of buys, and Justin Jefferson probably still going to be out at that point. So I think in that instance, like just, mark this down for your fab run next week. If you're pinched at receiver, I think that you could probably do worse than him. But that's about it on that. And then Cam Akers starting to show up a little bit. Your thoughts there?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's to me pretty simple that Akers is obviously faster than Alexander Mattison. It's when people kind of point out that look at how much more explosive Akers is. To me, that's not interesting. I'm not saying that the Vikings can't care. I mean, coaches fall for shiny things constantly, and I really do believe running back evaluation is absolutely at its worst point ever. So just because I don't think Cam Akers can do more than Madison as a runner consistently doesn't mean that the Vikings coaches aren't disagreeing with me. But Akers has a sort of objective level of return for his carries in the NFL, and it's something below average. It's not even average by starting running back standards. So even if Madison is below average himself as a runner, and I would say he is, he's always been like a compiler as a runner. He's not explosive. He's not supposed to be explosive. So by definition, he needs to grind out yardage because he's not going to have 50-yard carries to juice the average over the bigger sample. But Madison historically has been really good in pass protection. I know he's dropped some passes this year, but this is literally the first time he's ever done that. Like he might have the yips and might never get over them, but Alexander Madison has great pass catching ability, and he, even ball security. Like he was the least frequent fumbler in the NFL before this year over any statistically significant sample. So he particularly if they're going to throw a lot, he's going to kind of keep getting in the way of Akers, because Akers, unless you're kind of designing a screen for him, and he's shown that he can make big plays on design screens. I mean, he is fast and for his size, but Akers, I don't know if it's kind of like a start-stop thing, a decisiveness issue. I don't know if he's like slow to pull the trigger. I don't know if he has vision limitations, but some combination of these things are clearly afflicting Akers, because someone as big and fast as him should have better returns as a runner. If he had even average variables in those other categories, he would be an above average runner, but he isn't. So I think even the idea that like Akers is a clear superior to Madison as a runner, it's a very situationally true thing. It's like, is he better when there's a wide lane and you want a big play? Yes, but there's other plays where Akers is probably just going to run into guys for no good reason because he's negative in vision and all other aspects. Whereas Madison, he's so slow that he can't afford to be anything less than good in those areas, or else he wouldn't be on the field in the first place. So to me, it just looks like it's a screwed up backfield, and I don't really know what to believe. I think desperation will push them into make them consider new approaches. I just think that the more you play a guy like Akers, the more likely it is that you're eventually reminded why he was ran out of the Rams for a bunch of nobodies. And it's committee backfield is what I see, happening.
Okay. All right. That's a good summation, like good breakdown of both of those guys. I've flickering up based on having, I don't know, like less than 10% Akers in my best ball portfolio, but I comb through some of the teams. It's like, wow, that is a dead spot. Now there might be some sign of life.
Oh, there's more than before. Yeah. More than he had with the Rams, certainly.
So that I'm going to take that as for what I can and just hang on to it. And Madison, I'm not stoked where I got him, but I'm definitely glad that most of my shares of him were in like the 8th or 9th round pre Dalvin Cook's release than when his new price in like the 4th round type of deal. Let's continue forward. We've got the Saints going to Indianapolis. This is basically a pick 'em. Although FanDuel has the Colts as 1.5 point home underdogs. I mean, one of the most bizarre games, not just of last week, but the entire season, maybe even in recent memory, where we have the Browns in Indianapolis going into this crazy shootout. No Deshaun Watson, no Anthony Richardson, and yet there's still almost 80 points scored in that game. Josh Downs, obviously, kind of like the big story coming out of that one for fantasy as it applies to this game. And the Saints, they had so many chances, I felt like, on Thursday night against the Jaguars. And
I thought you were going to say that was the weird game. You're saying there's such a weird game last week. I was like, oh yeah, Derek Carr, what's wrong with that guy? And then no, the other one. Oh, right. Yeah, both of those games were insane. And for me, granted, I didn't get to see the Colts Cleveland one. I know that ref stuff in real time can be completely maddening, but I was losing my mind watching that Saints one, because just the level of just tangible frustration and like ire among the Saints and their fans kind of toward Derek Carr on the offense. And you could tell Carr, not the most gracious recipient of criticism. He was kind of channeling that back out at everything around him. And it was just, the toxicity levels were just, we were swimming in it, it was crazy. And they were, it was almost like the last time I could remember an NFL situation where you could feel like the frustration of everyone kind of just at once screaming a thought, like, just do it, just do the one simple thing right. And then the offense at once never doing it, but having like an agonizing number of chances to do it and fail in a single game was kind of like those Freddie Kitchens goal line situations with the Browns where it'd be like, okay, got 10 chances from the goal line. Surely we can run it in. And it's just like, nope, 0 for 10. You can't do it. And it's like, that's what it felt like watching Carr, where it's just like, everyone's just begging him to make like a T-ball level play. And he drops back, and every time you're denied. It's crazy.
They had a similar like dumb end game against Houston where they had all these chances and still like could not convert. I mean, they
can't run the offense. They can't run the offense.
Okay, I have a take that I should probably be like pelted with rotten vegetables and fruit for. Maybe it's because I haven't watched enough Saints this year until last week, but Taysom Hill is valuable to that offense. I think like he's just such like I don't know. I don't think he's a football guy, but I think he's a football player, if that makes sense. Like that, he just can do everything. If he was born in the 19 teens, he would be like the foil to Jim Thorpe or something. Like
he probably is like Jim Thorpe comp. Yeah.
I don't know. I like watching him play. I know it's goofy and we hate it for fantasy, but I think
he's definitely useful for that. I mean, I happen to think like Jawan Johnson can do something as a pass catcher if there's a tight end who can throw, or sorry, if there's a quarterback who can actually throw to the tight ends. But Taysom Hill is definitely better than Derek Carr as a quarterback right now. Like it's not even close. It's completely obvious. It's plainly evident. Jameis Winston also is better than Carr is the problem. Oh, yeah. I don't know how to. I'm like, should we go with Winston and just have Taysom Hill be the starting tight end at least as long as Johnson's out, or should we make Taysom Hill the starting quarterback and be like, sorry, Jameis, but we're just running the wishbone from here. But Derek Carr he's the kind of bad right now, and I think it's like a temperament issue in a way. It's like this is what happens when a quarterback is kind of like spoiled instead of held to a standard. You know, they signed him, they handpicked him in free agency with kind of like the implicit narrative of like, this is the guy, we got our quarterback. And once you commit to that, once you kind of start laundering that sort of narrative, you have to kind of take the ride you just bought the ticket to, you know, like you can't just say like, oh, actually we'll go with Jameis in week 4. It's like the GM rightfully would take it as like a public humiliation if the person that they were kind of peddling to everybody all off season, the player they went out to acquire over Jameis Winston, who was already there, or Andy Dalton, who was better for them last year at a much lower price, that GM needs to kind of like keep believing the lie. They can't afford to do anything else. Once Winston or Hill goes in at quarterback over Carr, it's just we're throwing in the towel on the whole season, and that GM's on the way out. It's just clear. And so no matter how bad it gets with Carr, we're probably going to have to keep watching it. And he's not the sort to ever say like, my bad. He's always just going to complain. He's always going to be pointing at other people like he was in the last game. So this could get incredibly awkward. And the toxicity that we mentioned last week, they might be swimming in it all year, or unless there's like an in-season firing of the GM, which I can't really remember ever happening before.
No. Did that happen in Tennessee, or was that like right after?
I mean, it's probably happened. It's probably happened. I just can't remember when, and who knows what kind of like personal things had to flare up between them and the owner to get it to that point.
Right. Exactly. So I don't know. Kind of a woo-woo question for you though, but with Carr's kind of general goth aesthetic, do you think that he will tap into the Halloween energy this weekend and play somewhat decently?
No, I think Carr's. I've seen people compare Carr to Robert Smith of The Cure, and that's blasphemy. Too. That's blasphemy.
Yeah, you can't say that.
Robert Smith, actual God, living God, and like I'm actually repulsed and sickened when people do that. He shouldn't.
He's more like Derek Carr.
Oh, I was gonna say Derek Carr. If I remember right, he kind of looks like the bad guy in Death Stranding. Who's like an annoying I'm such a bad guy, and I even I have bad guy signifying makeup on, and so he kind of has like the guyliner sort of aesthetic that Carr kind of emits when he's really brooding on the sideline. I would compare him more to the Death Stranding guy, whatever his name is.
I could see him hanging out with the goth kids in South Park, and then like that they're in a candlelit room, and then the mom comes in, it's like, we have cookies.
I don't know. I think he's like too much of like a military guy to do the goth kids, but I don't know, maybe like just imagine a bunch of kids wearing camo and like crying in a pen. Like that group is what Carr would hang out with.
Yeah, I think that distills it down well. On the Indianapolis side of things, again with Josh Downs looking promising and Jonathan Taylor starting to get himself on track. What do you expect from this Indianapolis offense this weekend?
Well, I like Josh Downs quite a bit, but to be fair, that play was pretty much like a busted coverage. Like it's totally possible that Downs and Gardner Minshew kind of identified the spot. Like maybe they saw like, oh crap, this coverage is going to lose me if I just run out to the right side and take the sideline. They're going to mix up the handoff or whatever. But even if they did know that specifically was going to happen, it's like the Browns, if they just run a different look, should have had that play covered.
Mm-hmm.
The players running that coverage probably should have just kept an eye on Downs and been prepared to improvise, because it's like, if you see the guy getting cut loose, just go after him. Make sure someone else is going after him, something. But they kind of cut him loose, and it's not a play that Downs will normally make. Like he's normally the guy who's getting like 6 yards depth of target over the middle, and in that role, yes, he should get targets pretty reliably, but he also is dependent on yards after the catch being really high to certainly to get over 120 yards on 5 catches. He's more likely on 5 catches going to give you like 55 yards, So
Mm-hmm.
I like Downs, and I certainly think he fell too far in the draft, but I would not get your hopes up for more games quite like last week, not this year anyway.
Okay, I still think that he's like a startable wide receiver 3. I think it.
Yeah. I'm not trying to. Yeah, definitely not trying to push back on the Downs hype, because he's especially in PPR. Like he should have a bunch of those. Maybe not this year, but he could a bunch of like 6 catch 70-yard games, and in PPR at the price that you got him, that's still gold.
Oh, absolutely. So I remember you talking about Downs as like a favorite late round target in best ball, and I definitely ascribed to that a little bit, but I wish I had some more. But
you were taking Puka Nacua, so
that's right.
Yeah.
And then occasionally misstepping and falling down, picking Michael Wilson. I don't know. Maybe there was still something to be there once
he's already paid
Tyler's
off.
back.
Yeah. Michael Wilson as an 18th round pick has literally already paid off, and hopefully Kyler can get that count at least a couple more weeks. I think he will.
I think so too. I'm interested to see what this Arizona offense looks like once he gets back. And Jimmy chimes into our Derek Carr aesthetic discussion, saying that he looks like a low budget Jon Snow.
Yeah, he's kind of like a I don't know. I don't remember Jon Snow being quite so blubbering, but if there's ever a point, and I guess the pouty face thing, I guess, is what Jimmy's probably talking about, right? The brooding, so everyone knows how deep you are, kind of thing.
Right. I'm not a Game of Thrones guy myself, but trust me, I've been on the internet enough.
That's right. Even when it was good, John hated it.
That's right, man. I'm just a hater. But I think that covers this game. I'm oddly intrigued by this matchup on Sunday. I think it could get kind of funky, kind of weird. Let's go on over to the Dolphins Patriots. We got the Dolphins 9.5-point favorites at home. Tyreek Hill dealing with a bit of a hip issue yesterday that prevented him from practicing. So we'll see what the deal is there. And I think Mostert might have shown up on the injury report as well. So those are a couple of things to be monitoring when it comes to the Dolphins. But they're facing a team that they've already beaten in the Patriots. They're at home this time. But the Patriots, I mean, was there anything that you saw? Was it the Patriots actually playing well, or was it the Bills just screwing around?
This one's really tough for me because, John, you might recall I was like always ongoing complexed about why the Patriots were so bad from weeks 2 to 6, and I didn't mean to sound like a truther or anything, but I was like, man, they were just doing pretty well against the Eagles. I don't understand how it's quite this bad. Maybe it has to do with all these injuries on the offense. Those injuries on the offensive line are, I think, ultimately like a pretty good excuse for how bad things got. Like when you have such bad receivers and such a bad offensive line at the same time, it's just like tossing the quarterback out as bait. Like it's just ridiculous. So like on the one hand, I didn't quite subscribe to some of the assumptions, some of the conclusions reached about Mac Jones. It's like, which, the endless complexity of this to me, John, is also informed by like, I initially was a Mac Jones kind of hater his rookie year. And now I'm like, no guys, he's merely the 22nd worst quarterback. He's not the 40th worst. And that's kind of like the frame that we're in now. And I really do believe Mac Jones is something at worst, like the 22nd best quarterback. It's a low bar. I don't think it's that outrageous to suggest it. And I think given how bad that offense is, like the personnel for injury or whatever reason, how bad it's been, there was always a pretty good excuse for Mac Jones, especially because he played so well against the Eagles, in my opinion, aside from, the first turnover or whatever it was. So I was waiting for, not in that game, but I was waiting for a game like that from Mac Jones, in the Patriots, I guess. Like I was like, if that defense had stayed healthy, if its offensive line had stayed healthy, I really do believe the Patriots would be like a viable playoff team, especially if they just added a receiver who was vaguely useful. So I was kind of predisposed to expecting to see something like that out of the Patriots, but it was still surprising. And given how bad they looked before, it's like I feel like I'm asking myself if I want to reach for the stove again that I've already burned my hand on. It's like, do you think you can do it this time? It's like I kind of feel like it's safe, but why do I feel that way? I shouldn't, and I don't know what to call it going forward. It seems like it has to be better going forward in the sense that like it can't possibly stay as bad as it was, but it is all the same difficult to just assume the Bills didn't blow it, because they've kind of done that lately, and it's tough for me to tell which variable was the active one. New England improving versus the Bills just stumbling more. In any case, if Tyreek Hill is out of this game or even limited, and Jalen Waddle we got to keep an eye on too, I guess. The Dolphins go from one of the best teams to one of the worst, I think, in a hurry without Tyreek Hill, and especially if it's without Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle's limited. Like that team is good because their passing game is unstoppable. It's not because their defense does anything helpful. It's even the run game, as great as the returns have been, it's largely cleared out for the space that it exploits by said passing game. So I think without Hill, the whole thing is liable to kind of come apart. Even if McDaniel continues to be, one of the very best coaches, play callers in the league. So I'm a little worried for the Dolphins offense, but hopefully the Tyreek Hill thing, I guess, no practice on Wednesday, and Waddle was limited. So I guess Waddle should be fine. And if I have to pick a side in this game, I'll pick the Dolphins. But the way it could go wrong for the Dolphins here is Mac Jones looks more like the 22nd best quarterback than the 40th or whatever people thought he was. And if Mac Jones looks merely that good, I think the Dolphins have a lot to worry about with their run defense. And if you don't have Tyreek Hill just auto scoring for you all the time, that run defense all of a sudden becomes a big problem. And the Patriots have little choice but to feed their own, their run game, because like Stevenson and Elliott are moving the ball the best because their receivers are incredibly bad. So Dolphins kind of begging the Patriots need to do, as a matter of practicality, the one thing that the Dolphins really don't want them to.
Will they do it? Will they push that button?
Yeah, they have to just try to feed both Stevenson and Elliott. It's the only way they can move the ball regularly.
And I think that they definitely could on the Dolphins. I'm with you there. They're a little bit soft defensively. I think that their cornerback personnel is getting healthier. I don't know if Jalen Ramsey is debuting this week, but I think there's probably not going to be a ton going in this passing game. Like to your point, like I think Mac Jones will play fine under the conditions, but he just has no help in that passing game. So going to have to be the run.
If they have to play catch up, then they fall apart every time.
Yeah, that's going to be just a no-go for the Patriots if that ends up being the case. 9.5, just enough for me to hold my nose and take the Patriots, though.
Also, John, it's supposed to be pretty windy there. So if you're talking like 20-mile-per-hour winds, I think that definitely helps the Patriots. Like it's not a neutral effect. It helps the Patriots the worse the weather is.
Yeah, they're bringing the winds down, the conditions down from New England down to Miami. I'm sure that the natives there or locals there appreciate the breeze, though. It's hot in Miami. Let's go Jets Giants. I don't want to spend a ton of time here, frankly, but
it's okay.
What do you
got? Well, Tyrod Taylor is better than Daniel Jones, so I guess we can expect Jones to get back soon. They gotta start polishing that turd again, John.
P that T
contract. P the T. I think that Saquon, they're totally the Giants are a totally different offense once they have Saquon back and he's doing a good job. But to me, this game quickly distills to the question of who produces more, the Jets run game or the Giants run game. And to me, Breece Hall clearly has the better setup here.
Yes.
I know the Jets are all beat to hell too on offense, but I feel like the Jets quietly had one of the best like backup offensive line personnel groups in the league because of, like looking at the guys who keep replacing all the injured ones, I was like, hey, that guy's not as bad as I was expecting. There's like they have now with a bunch of backups an offensive line that's probably no worse than slightly below average. A lot of teams have starting groups way worse than this. So
like the Giants.
Breece Hall, yeah, like them. If Breece Hall manifests the way he should in this game, I think it's kind of just not smooth sailing for the Jets, but they should dictate the whole kind of flow of the game if Breece Hall is going and Breece Hall, unless he has everything working against him, he's, I think, showing he's the kind of player who does make that impact.
To me, this one is fairly simple. I just think that the Jets completely cave in the Giants patchwork offensive line. And then on the other side, I mean, the Giants defense has played better in recent weeks. It couldn't be playing worse than it was through September. Like they were just completely worthless in September. I will finish that thought once my dog stops growling. Continue.
Okay. Bentley needs to protect John from the drifters knocking on his window. But I think what John was going to say was something to the effect of, Quinnen Williams, total monster, Giants offensive line, not good to start with, and additionally destroyed by injuries. That Jets front four is pretty nasty. And I think even if Tyrod's the starter, even if Daniel Jones is the starter and he for some reason plays great, this will be a situation where the playing circumstances remain very difficult and more difficult for the quarterback on the Giants side than Zach Wilson on the Jets. The Wilson factor, of course, not to be skipped, but the Jets can hide Zach Wilson, I think, and I don't think there's any way for the Giants to take cover anywhere.
Nope, the Giants are going to be just in rough shape every time that they have the ball, and the Jets, it might not be pretty. And again, the Giants defense has played a little bit better of late, but I'm still all over the Jets in this game. Let's go. I think probably the best game of the early window. We got the Jags and the Steelers. This one taking place in Pittsburgh. We got the Jags 2.5-point favorites on the road.
Yeah. Also a complicated one for me. Last week, I'll never truly learn it, even though I'm like the person who seems to say it the most. Like you can never just assume Tomlin will have the worst game plan, no matter what. Like Tomlin always, he will never have a losing season. It just can't happen for some reason. I don't understand why, but I think at this point we have to start to entertain the possibility that it is physically impossible for Mike Tomlin to have a losing season. Some credit, I guess I got to give to Kenny Pickett. And, this is kind of going back to the Brandon Powell thing for me in a way, John, because it's like Pickett played really good against the Rams in a way. Admittedly, I did not think he had games like that in him. It was still like 25 passes, still like, he's being hidden in that approach. But he made the plays that he needed to,
right,
while being hidden, and then the Steelers had the win to show for it. So if he can keep being that kind of quarterback, I guess while I believe he is some version of bad, like if you could be a good 25 pass attempt quarterback, and if your team is okay with never calling more than 25 pass attempts, I guess you can have games like last week happen. But that usually isn't how it goes. And the Jags defense, don't get me wrong, I'm not quite understanding how they've had results this good. Part of it is that Darius Williams has had some really good games at one corner spot. The corner depth, I guess, was the biggest question. And aside from Tyson Campbell, it's always looked to me like, well, these guys can't cover, especially kind of against like bigger receiver groups. But their pass rush, I guess Josh Allen carrying a lot of it. He's been going nuts, of course. The run defense has been really good. I guess that could be certainly Devin Lloyd seems better this year.
Trayvon.
Trayvon, I have trouble understanding his effect, but also like Foyesade Oluokun has had a really good year. So I guess maybe those guys and maybe like the Foley Fatukasi defensive tackle types, Roy Robertson, Harris, whatever. Maybe those guys are playing really rugged, holding gaps well, and maybe Lloyd, Oluokun, maybe they're red hot right now and getting to the pursuit spots really well with that good cover underneath. And if that kind of stuff keeps happening here, they should be able to smother, be it Najee Harris, Jalen Warren, whoever. The Jags should be able to swallow up this run game because it's kind of what they've done all year. It would be a little bit, it would be out of character for them to have anything less than a strong showing on run defense here. And if you can keep Kenny Pickett in like, 3rd and 9+, that kind of stuff, and if you can get ahead in the game, then I think you've got Pittsburgh in a really difficult spot. But the longer you go in a game with it being close against them, the more you have to worry that you're getting caught in a trap, because you don't want to deal with Tomlin and those kind of like just I don't even know. There's probably a word for situations like this, but just where it's like winner mentality gets the win. He'll always have the winner mentality, and it's tough to call for me because I will always lean toward Pickett pessimism. But I also still, John, don't believe in Press Taylor at all on the Jacksonville side. I think the Jags offense is still describes as, ETN or bust. And if that's your offense, even as someone who's really high on ETN, that's just needlessly risky and complicated. Like, you should be rolling with this personnel that you have, Trevor Lawrence and these receivers. You should be rolling every week almost. And instead it's like everything has to be just, diving through the rapidly closing mechanical door. Like, everything that turns out well, it's just they barely get through by the skin of their teeth. And it's just Tomlin doesn't need to work so hard to get results, So I think the Jags got to be careful.
They definitely do. I mean, the Steelers are, even when they're not great, they're still never a pushover. Where are we at? Let's get a temperature check on Calvin Ridley.
I think he's doing good. I think it's Press Taylor's the problem. I mean, you saw the Saints were rolling tons of coverage help toward Calvin Ridley. And when do you see Calvin Ridley motioning before the snap? When do you see them trying to get him away from the bracket? You never see that. You might generously say that, well, then that means Press Taylor and Doug Peterson have a philosophy of don't force it then. Just take what the defense gives you. Fine, but you need to be able to threaten downfield. If they want to roll coverage toward Ridley, and if you're going to say, well, we're just not going to throw to him then because they rolled coverage to him, then you need to make the defense pay for that. And what they do instead is they check down to Evan Ingram, and like that's not enough. You need to hurt the defense such that they think twice about rolling that coverage again. Because when you simply say, fine, defense, if you're going to put two people toward Ridley, we'll just throw it to Jamal Agnew. Guess what? The defense says, thank you. Please throw it to Jamal Agnew again. Keep doing that. And that Press Taylor's approach has led them to that exact point. They get out there and they're like, oh, what? I'm going to be pragmatic about this and throw the ball to my worst player 8 times. And maybe that'll work. Maybe it'll work if Travis Etienne bails you out again and that defense bails you out again. Maybe that's not enough against Mike Tomlin, though, and on the road, moreover.
Visions of David Garrard beating the Steelers in the postseason and at Heinz Field danced through my head. But I think was that Tomlin's first year? Yeah, I think it was Tomlin's first year. Long time ago. I suppose the more recent example would be the Bortles game from the 2017 season.
Yeah.
Good times. Let's see here. Let's go on to Falcons Titans. We've got the Falcons as 2.5-point favorites on the road, so similar to the Jaguars. Set up the over-under in this game. Can you guess what it is? Think of a Wisconsin
30,
game.
36.5.
Really close. 35.5. Nice.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah, I guess that sounds about right. I'm a little surprised that I guess it's was this after the Levis announcement? I guess it was before.
This is the live.
So this hasn't even changed since the announcement that Levis is going to start, right? Because it opened at 30. The over under has gone down, but it opened at Tennessee plus 2.5. So that's interesting.
It's been stable.
I don't know what to make of that. I know that Ryan Tannehill was getting really awful returns, be it due to injury or whatever else, but even as a Tannehill, I'd say I'm a pseudo hater of Tannehill. I think it can get a lot worse with Levis. It can get better with Levis if they strip down the offense and make it kind of like, hey, Levis, maybe they call him William. I don't know. They say, hey, you're going to look at 2 spots, and if they're not open, you're running. Do you understand? And he can understand that, and he's totally willing, prepared, eager to bash his head against the defense upwards of 12 times a game. I don't doubt that Levis is up for that. And whatever other limitations he has, he definitely can throw a ball far and fast, and he can definitely run really well for someone as big as he is. So if you reduce the offense to kind of like, a half field run emphasis kind of thing, they might get more functional on offense. But if they need Levis to throw the ball from, more elaborate structures, like the kind of plays that Tannehill was operating from, that would be worse, I think. So I don't know. I definitely like the under because I think we can expect the Titans to run more, make the clock go that much faster, make it that much more difficult for either team to score a lot. And I guess part of the problem for me here, John, is I don't have a good sense of what the Atlanta run defense is like. I know they've had some good games, but I can't tell if I believe in it. They've had really, really good results. I mean, no touchdowns allowed on 149 carries to running backs at 3.6 yards per carry. So that's a pretty complete
That's
shutdown.
Good. Even considering, the opposing run games that they face, like none of which have been good. You go back to Carolina and Washington, and obviously with the Bucs last week, like those aren't teams that are going to generate much. But even with that, caveat baked in, it's still been stingy against the run.
Yeah, so I think Derrick Henry clearly still has it, and I do think the Falcons got to be wary in this case of Mike Vrabel having an entirely new offense to not just suit Levis, but just to take advantage of the element of surprise. And if they give like some trap looks, some run game looks that the Falcons think they saw on the tape, and it's a little bit of a tweak, like maybe Levis holds it and bootlegs the other way. They got to watch out for that kind of stuff and make sure they don't accidentally cut loose Henry or even Levis, I guess, as a runner. But if they play just sound basic football, I really struggle to see how the Titans move the ball in this game. And I guess I struggle to see how the Falcons move the ball too. But at least they have more underachieving talent. Not underachieving, that's the wrong word. They're being denied the opportunity to produce, but they have the talent. Whereas on the Titans side, it's just kind of like, what are we even doing here?
Is there potential for a grasshopper sensei advantage for Tennessee here with Vrabel, his former pupil, coming into town?
Arthur Smith. I don't know, man. I mean, I guess I have
even for me. That's
PTSD.
A stupid question.
Well, no, there's nothing. There's very possibly something to it. However, I have too much PTSD from the time that the Matt Patricia Lions beat the Patriots that I'm just kind of like, no, there's nothing there. I'm never raising this one ever again.
Yeah. I think I would take a gander at a Jonnu Smith anytime touchdown prop. That's about it there.
That revenge.
Yeah, gotta get it. Gotta get that revenge. But beyond that, I think we pretty much covered this one.
Who cares?
It's a very Spider-Man meme type of game. Washington hosting the Eagles. Eagles 6.5-point favorites in this one. Kind of figured that this would be a little bit higher. A little surprising there, but even still, we've got Philly as nearly touchdown favorites on the road in the division. Washington obviously gave them a really tough game earlier this season. I feel like the Eagles get them back pretty significantly here. I think that Washington is really kind of taking a downturn. I mean, losing the Giants the way that they did last week, my faith is wavering completely when it comes to Washington being any semblance of functional.
Yeah, there hasn't. I can't believe how I don't know this answer already. There's been no coaches fired yet, right? This
Nope.
year. Okay, so those bets about first coach fired, if they're still accepting any of those, I'd go and put something on Ron Rivera, because I really think if they lose in week 9 to the Patriots, I think that's it. I think because they're going to lose this game. The Eagles are going to beat them, and after they do, I don't know what Washington's record will be, but it's going to be bad. And John, there's one little thing from last week that I think it means it's the end for Ron. I think he's totally done. The way that they did not give Emmanuel Forbes playing time, like I know he was coming back from a groin injury, but if I know that was from earlier. So yeah, they healthy scratched him a couple of weeks ago. And
against Atlanta, I want to say.
Yeah, and giving snaps to Danny Johnson instead. John, what this is very simple. It's a coach who has failed and needs to explain to someone why he did this. How did you do this, Ron? What's the problem? Like, what can't you figure out exactly? And he was like, well, it's not me. It's Forbes. He can't cover AJ Brown. That's why we're bad. It's him. Yeah, we just got to bench him, see? And once we get Danny Johnson on the field, we'll be able to beat the Giants, I promise. And look, check it out, Ron. It's actually you is the problem. And also, to the extent that we want to recount the whole Forbes versus Brown thing, whose choice was it to leave the rookie corner in single coverage with no safety help against, at worst, a top 3 NFL receiver over and over and over the entire course of the game? Yeah, but it's also Ron Rivera, you know? And it's like, so the way it ends up to Ron is like, Ron, what the hell is this? And he's like, well, you know, it's not my fault. So I guess it's Forbes. I guess it's that guy who had like 30 intercepted passes for 7 touchdowns at Mississippi State when they had one of the best pass defenses in the country. It's probably his fault, and Danny Johnson's probably the solution. Like, you're toast. You are completely washed. You have nothing left. You got like 5 seconds, dude. It's done. It's over. Forbes is not the problem. Ron Rivera is the problem. And when you're down to that level of desperate scapegoating, not new to Ron. He's done it before with other players, like namely Antonio Gibson. But this is too low. You can't come back from this. It's over.
It's bleak as all get out when it comes to Washington. I don't know, any other fantasy angles, thoughts for this game? Is there anything that you're liking for DFS or anything of that nature?
But I would pick up Chris Rodriguez if you have a totally burnt bench spot going to some nobody. I think Chris Rodriguez, the time to pick him up now is because Ron Rivera, again, I think he's getting fired soon. And when he gets fired, it's going to be an audition for Eric Bieniemy as the interim head coach. And Eric Bieniemy has no prior investment in Brian Robinson. He has a recent investment in Rodriguez as lobbying for that pick specifically as the offensive coordinator. And this is important too. Rodriguez is better. So once the political utility of Brian Robinson has exhausted itself, they're going to come down to a more merit-based determination of playing time. Rodriguez wins when that comes up.
Yeah, I actually did grab Rodriguez in 1 or 2 spots in Fab this week. So I was glad to see him start to get on the field a little bit. Let's get over to the afternoon window. We've got the Browns and the Seahawks. Seahawks 3.5-point favorites in this one. Obviously, the Deshaun Watson angle there playing into that. I don't know. I can't make heads or tails of the Seahawks. Like I want to believe, but I always end up not. I don't know. Your thoughts on this particular setup here?
Well, it's a dangerous spot for the Seahawks just because the Browns, even though they're falling apart, their defense is tough and their defense is good for personnel-based reasons, right? Like, it's not like they're just kinda they're not ambushing people with a novel game plan. It's just this is just how good they are, and when so much of their strength is specifically in the form of, the Myles Garrett, Zadarius Smith pass rush, this is a setting where it's like, pass rush being difficult to screw up the way it plays, and the Seahawks having struggled with pass rush in various games. I know they got Charles Cross getting healthier, that should help, but it's been an issue, and if that's an issue of yours, you have to figure you're in for at the very least a challenge against a team like the Browns. So I worry from that angle. The part that I can't figure out is the Browns offense side. I I don't understand the Watson thing at all. It sure seems like he's just kind of like trying to quit. I don't know what is going on in his brain, but you're seeing understandably people question his toughness, and
Yeah,
that's not quite possible in my opinion. Like he's tough. We've seen Watson, return from an ACL tear in like 8.5 months. That's not
right.
easy to do if you're a wuss. And he played fearlessly on it. It's not a toughness issue, but it seems to be a mental degradation issue. Like he's kind of just going insane or something, or maybe he just I don't know what is going on in that guy's mind, but it's not possible that he's not tough enough to deal with it. It's like he's not cooperating, and
He hasn't even like you kind of had to squint to like say that he had good games earlier in the year too, in my
I
opinion.
never really had one. He's like he seems checked out or something, or like I don't know if it's just he does seem insane enough to maybe be doing something like I'm gonna get back at the league for stabbing me in the back. This is not a sane person's inner monologue, but if it's Deshaun Watson, maybe it makes sense, and maybe he's like, yeah, I'll show them. I'm just not gonna play, or like I'm gonna get all this money and not do anything, and I'm gonna get back at them for what they did to me. I don't know, but short of something like that, it's just impossible for me to understand what's going on with him. What we do know is PJ Walker. If let's see, I'm trying to think where does he land relative to Sean Clifford? He's probably like 5 spots ahead of Sean Clifford in the quarterback, like 6th worst in the NFL on any roster or practice squad, something like that. It's bad. Kevin Stefanski, I think he's shown himself to be a coach who's just pretty much like a middle manager kind of coach. Like he shows up and he makes sure everybody's at work on time and that they're doing the thing they're supposed to, but he doesn't have any insight as a coach. He doesn't know how to lift a team. And I think his time is running out. I think he's running out of ideas, and those things are real limitations on the Browns. I guess the PJ Walker factor, the Stefanski collapse factor, and eventually those guys are going to stop really playing for him. They don't need it doesn't need to be a full blown mutiny. It just can be like losing the faith and earnestly losing the faith and not being able to do better even if you want to. And it's like the Browns got to be pretty close to that, and a couple nasty interceptions by Walker on the road might let that despair kind of sink in and, maybe make the defense play sloppier than they normally would. I don't know.
Right, because the defense obviously had some uncharacteristic issues last week against Gardner Minshew. I mean, now you go on the road to Seattle, tough place to play. Yeah, this could end up being a pretty tough spot for the Browns. And then from the fantasy lens for the Browns and their backfield, your thoughts on the Jerome Ford injury, Kareem Hunt and Pierre Strong and the like.
Yeah, it's frustrating. I don't know how to, I don't know how to guess the way the playing time is going to go because them using Kareem Hunt at all is kind of weird to me. I feel like he's kind of shown that he's got nothing left, but they might go with him anyway because they've been kind of even early in games. They've been giving him like the first drives of games a couple times now, and then they go to forward in the second drive. What is this? What are you doing, Stefanski? Like what is that supposed to do? Like, see, guys, we respect veterans around here, even the ones that we willingly left out of the league. It's a silly thing, and I don't know if it's desperation or symbolism or what on Stefanski's part, but it's not a good idea And the more they give Hunt the ball, the more they're just shrinking the field on themselves. I don't know what Strong's issue is. I don't know how to explain when a guy, gets the kind of yardage that he tends to, and then also doesn't see the field. I guess they must hate his pass blocking or something. The Patriots before this, but if I have to pick between the two, man, it's tough because you have the usage much more assured with Hunt, but you also have the likelihood of like 3.2 yards per carry or less with Hunt. Pierce Strong might double whatever the yards per carry amount is for Hunt.
I mean, I could see it. I mean, he's the fastest running back at the combine the year he was drafted. There definitely is some talent there, but there clearly must also be some deficiencies in his game. That's why he's on his second team in 2 years in the league and not really getting a ton of runs. So it's tricky. I mean, like I would spec add Pierre Strong, but I still kind of have some wavering or lingering faith that he gets it figured out and his kind of speed ends up showing through. But for now, it's hard to like justify starting him. And then with DK Metcalf coming back this week, what does that do for your JSN projection?
Well, this is a tough matchup for Smith and Jigba because I believe, assuming I haven't missed any injuries with this, I believe Greg Newsome would be his primary matchup. And Greg Newsome, I think there's a case that he's the best of the Browns. I think most people would say Denzel Ward, and I wouldn't argue against it. But Newsome's definitely a little more complete. Ward has the burning speed, but Newsome is still very fast, and he's not quite so small. A little bit more rugged, more capable of kind of crashing down underneath. And Smith and Jigba, he's clearly on an improving course. I guess I have trouble figuring out still if they've really found a role for him, because what they were doing the first month, 6 weeks was just odd. Like he's playing 30 or 40 snaps a game and he's getting 5 or 6 targets a game, but they're all at like 2 yards depth of target. It shouldn't be that difficult to get him some targets downfield, and yet no one else is struggling to this. Lockett and Metcalf, they're doing fine. So it was hard to just write off, making a big excuse of it or anything. But and I think it's, as long as Metcalf's on the field, I'm personally going to have a little bit of a concern about the structure of the offense having room for Smith and Jigba. Like I don't know if it's like he needs like routes that kind of are multi-part, freeing him up underneath, that leak play, that they get him crossing over the middle and then looking for a spot where there's a gap in the zone and then turning up field. It's like, that's sort of that requires like an accommodation that Lockett and Metcalf don't need. And you're talking an offense that already plays a lot of 2 tight end snaps and isn't going to change because the tight ends are good. They have 3 good tight ends. So yeah, I think Smith and Jigba, unfortunately for this year, might kind of remain dependent on an injury to Lockett or Metcalf ahead of him. And in those situations, I think so much structurally clears up that, yeah, he should be fine in those games, just like he was last week, just like, he's pretty good against the Bengals before that. But if Metcalf and Lockett are on the field, I just think maybe the immediate reality is just like he is not good enough at getting open relative to those two to take high quality targets at either's expense.
Yeah. So I think if I have a JSN share burning a hole in my pocket, I might be trying to sell high after last week, because I think that comes back down this week. Let's go Ravens Cardinals. Ravens 8-point favorites on the road out in the desert. Ravens obviously put together what I thought to be a pretty nice game last Sunday against the Lions. That's my NPR analysis of that game. But that was awesome. That was sick. That was, I thought, the Monken offense really kind of hitting a new stride. I thought that they did a really good job, not just protecting Lamar, but Lamar also showed some like pretty insane pocket awareness. I mean, there were several times where you kind of lose Lamar Jackson in the frame because there's just offensive and defensive linemen all around him, and he still finds a way to get out of there and make a play down the field. And I think my favorite play from like a structural perspective last week was they did a sprint right where Lamar had no real interest in running, and he wasn't even showing it with his body language. that he was going to start to press, but the entire Lions front seven flowed to cut him off at the sideline. And this is on a 1st and 20. They had just gotten a penalty. Mark Andrews just sneaks over past the defense, and they pick up the first down. Like, I thought that was like the perfect distillation of like how you use Lamar Jackson's rushing threat to open up the pass game.
Yeah, the Lions, I thought, had done a really good job defensive scheming all year under Aaron Glenn, but that game, and quickly realized it in that game too, is just, this is one of those games where one of the teams got completely ambushed. Like their whole game plan, they managed to pick some of the worst ideas, and they've been set back so quickly by this that no likely amount of in-game adjustments can do a whole lot about it. Like if the Lions really tried to pull up every way to catch up in that game that they might have had at their disposal, they'd be sort of just burning high leverage plays in their playbook and putting it on film, and then they'd use it in a situation where they couldn't win anyway, So it's just like when you get totally just rocked so quickly like that, in a lot of ways, what follows from that point is not even a real game anymore. It's only pseudo contested. So it was great to see, though, the Ravens offense show that kind of quick strike ability, because it had been so lacking. Lamar had really good peripherals as a passer in all the games before, insofar as he was completing a lot of his passes for a totally healthy yards per attempt. But there was so much grinding of it out, so many like Zay Flowers screens for 6 yards, stuff like that. And it was like, you need to reach the vertical elements. That's how you get the most out of Lamar. Like so many quarterbacks, talk about with Josh Allen. It's definitely true with Lamar too. Like he's doing a good job with these underneath passes, but get the vertical game going. If you get the vertical game going, watch how hard it is to defend Lamar Jackson as a runner. That's specifically the arrangement they had his rookie year. It's like that high-low threat. Like, you want to defend the run? Fine, we're going vertical on you. Maybe you're not going to defend the run next time, right? And like Lamar gets 20 yards on 2 carries in a row. They say, okay, let's bring the coverage back up. Play action deep, no one there. You just do that. It's simple. And I thought their problem was simply, to start the year, they had no vertical threat at all, and the field was going to keep shrinking on them until they got it going. I'm still skeptical that Zay Flowers is a sufficient primary deep threat. I don't think that's the strength of his game, and it bothers me that they kind of keep forcing that to him. But he's good. I feel like he's most maximized when you get him like yards after the catch in space and the intermediate stuff like that. And not that Bateman exactly is a classic deep threat, but I feel like they at the very least have to stop playing Aguilar. And I know Aguilar had some good plays to start the year, but his peripherals said all along, like this guy's got like 525 BABIP. Like it's going to come down, and it's going to come down hard. And when it does, your offense doesn't any longer have the budgeting aside to make the math work. Like you need Bateman to fill that void when it happens, or you just have nothing left. And I think, I know you're low on Bateman, understandably.
Sure.
But if they can't get him going, the regression is going to hit again, and it's going to look bad when it does. And if they can't get Bateman to be that guy, then they should make a trade for somebody else. How about Marquise Brown? I don't know. Not even joking. Like if they get somebody with a vertical threat like that, the whole thing goes nuts.
Yeah, and they're going to be playing against Marquise Brown this weekend. But with Bateman, obviously, it's well documented. I'm a bit of a hater, but when he was cooking early last year, he was a deep threat, and I thought that last week was encouraging. Like his 2 catches were for 20 and 16 yards respectively, if I'm remembering correctly. So like that, those aren't huge deep shots, but those are, splash plays by definition, more than 15 yards. So I would like to see them explore a little bit more of that. And I also thought that Beckham looked the best that he has thus far this season. You got to reframe your thoughts on Odell Beckham at this stage. He's not what he once was, but if he can be like
healthy, you could see like, oh yeah, there's that. He's still doing all the backflips and all that. And
he ran after the catch a little bit last week, which we hadn't really seen to this point in the season yet. So I was encouraged by that, and I think that as long as they don't have some sort of giant mental lapse, like this should be a spot where they just completely crush the Cardinals.
Yes. Despite my concerns about, the Ravens being able to get where they want to get to and where I feel like they should and, ought to be able to get to, this matchup has no concerns. I think we saw last week the bottom has completely fallen out from the Josh Dobbs offense. The initial success that it had this year was a lot like, not just the lowered expectations part, but it was a lot like the Dolphins Wildcat offense. It's just, you caught people with an approach that's not on much tape, and now that they've seen it, they know you have nothing, and they've got you figured out, and it's just over now.
Yeah, we're ready for Kyler to be back, and hopefully James Conner gets back in the fold. There's been a lot of questions in the chat today, Mario, about Amari DiMercato. Oh no, I've just been answering them. It's all good. But when it comes to DiMercato, I he obviously had a solid game last week after the, rug pull that happened the week prior. But my framing for DiMercato for fantasy managers over these next couple of weeks is, yes, he probably gets a role these next 2 weeks, but it's against the Ravens and the Browns. I have a hard time seeing a spot, especially when every team's in action this week, for example, like where you need to start DiMercato.
Yeah, I think what the Cardinals are pretty clearly doing is maybe a combination of like, we're giving the reps to the guys who earned it in practice this week, or they're doing it as an evaluative thing. Like, let's see DiMercato start this week. We're not going anywhere. Let's see how he looks. Stuff like that. Just as easily as they put him on they took the ball away from him 2 weeks ago, they might do it again any other time upcoming, because they didn't give his playing time on the basis of merit. It was just some decision they made, and it's not based on anything, so it need not remain on any basis. But yeah, if they keep going with him, I think it's pretty clear what will happen. He won't go very far. The Seahawks were kind of cutting loose that underneath offense. They kind of saw like, you know what? If we just keep someone over Marquise Brown and we don't let Michael Wilson get behind us, this quarterback can't get to his second read. And if he does, he still can't hit the broad side of a barn. So if you just dare the Cardinals to run, give them some cushions, let the offensive coordinator conclude something like, maybe we should attack underneath. And if you make a policy choice to take the ball from Marquise Brown and give it to DiMercato, they'll basically encourage you to do it more. And what you saw was DiMercato doing the best he can against a defense that wasn't trying particularly hard to stop him, and indeed was actually hoping the offense would give him the ball, which they did. And you saw his returns as a pass catcher completely evaporate, because that was the one capacity that they were sitting on as far as his usage went. They were sitting back and saying like, Dobbs, we know you can't get the ball downfield, but we're going to sit at the points that we think that you're going to check down to. And that's why DiMercato didn't get anything going as a pass catcher. Like, he can do more as a pass catcher, but not if the defense is looking for him like they were. So pretty clearly, in my opinion, 35, 40 grade player. Maybe the Cardinals for some reason keep giving him the ball, but it's not on the basis of merit, and they can make kind of just flippant decisions to reverse course like they already have.
And then with Zach Ertz being sidelined, what's your expectations for Trey McBride? Is he like legitimately startable in one tight end leagues?
Well, I don't have a good sense of. I would assume the Ravens are pretty tough against tight ends. I'm pulling that up right now.
Yeah, I mean the safety personnel, even though Marcus Williams has basically been a zero this year, Kyle Hamilton's been.
So they've been the toughest in terms of fantasy points per game. They've allowed 43 targets, 28 catches for 203 yards. So I kind of hate this matchup for McBride in the way that I would hate, unfortunately, next. I think he gets the 49ers next week. Warner.
Yes.
So it's a tough schedule for McBride, but I remain a truther insofar as he is clearly better than Zach Ertz and clearly should have been starting at tight end all year and probably would be among the reception leaders if they had. It's just really difficult spot for him to prove it, especially again, I think the Dobbs show has completely fallen apart. I think defenses are just kind of laughing at that offense now.
I tend to agree that the offense, like it was smoke and mirrors through the first month or so of the season, right. But it's over now. It's very much over. So I think the Cardinals are in for a long day. Sunday afternoon, let's go Broncos Chiefs. these guys just played each other a couple of Thursdays ago. That game stunk. Will this game be any better?
Probably not, but the Chiefs should be fine. They shouldn't stink too bad. It's more the Broncos with the stink on them, and I don't know why any of it would change here. I do think that the Chiefs offense is going to keep getting hotter over the course of the year. I'm biased, of course, but I really do think as little as bringing Mecole Hardman back. And John, I am obsessed about this, of course, but it's because it makes a lot of sense to me. When you can threaten the whole field, when you have speed that truly that the defense can understand, like this guy can get anywhere and faster than we'd like. They think about that. They have to spend bandwidth on it. They spend real resources on addressing it, even if that guy never gets the ball, or even if that guy isn't good at running slants from the slot or whatever it is that Hardman isn't good enough at. The defense cares, and the defense cuts loose other parts, and Mahomes always finds it. And I think Mahomes' struggles, it's just, guys are actually blanketed. There's literally nowhere to go with the ball. That's when Mahomes struggles. When Mahomes has anywhere to go with the ball, Mahomes finds it. He's pretty much close to infallible. Like he might have a bad half or even a whole game, but it just never lasts long. And the more he gets into the rhythm, the more unstoppable he gets. And I really think, not that they needed Hardman for this one. If they're giving, downfield outside routes to Sky Moore, they'd probably be fine in this one. But I do think the Chiefs offense is really ready to kind of like look scary again. And maybe in this game, I mean, it's not like the Broncos are posing much resistance, not likely anyway.
No, I don't think so either. So I think this is obviously a great spot for the Chiefs here as 7.5 point favorites on the road. I didn't see much of the Denver side of that game against the Packers last week, but was there anything actionable from that game that carries over to this week?
Such a weird way, offense to watch, because there were a lot of times where the Broncos seemed like they were doing pretty good things. Cortland Sutton, I thought, played really well. Probably one of the best games I've seen from him in a while. Javonte Williams looks totally good. I don't know, honestly, why they can't get him going more. He seems to be pretty much back to his normal self. And yet it's like you see these good little flickers from players like that, and then it just kind of just falls apart, or just for some reason never really seems to amount to points. I guess I can't see that changing for the better against Spagnuolo. I think the Chiefs defense is better than people notice. It's better than it's been in a number of years. And it's like the Broncos offense, maybe it's just as simple as they're such a great case and a great illustration of what it means to produce versus produce competitively. And it's like their usage just seems to be like defense is kind of letting them move the ball. And then when the defense tries to kind of like tighten up and do the bend but not break, the Broncos can never break a defense. Like in that situation, Russell Wilson will always fold or fail. It just hasn't changed in 2 years. So maybe there's garbage time numbers for the Broncos, but I can't see them being that great out of base functions for more than like 1 or 2 drives if they've got like a really good scripted drive or something. But like once things get hot, it's just over.
Yeah, I think the Broncos are in for a rough one on Sunday themselves. Best game of the afternoon window, Bengals Niners. Looks like we get the Sam Darnold Bay Area experience going up against the Bengals. Bengals coming off.
This is a big one for me. This
yes,
is for the truther. Huge. The truther pot is. There's a lot in there right now. I don't want Brock Purdy to miss this game, and I don't blame Brock Purdy for the 49ers losing against the Vikings. I would sooner kind of put it on the defense, actually, corner personnel more specifically. But if he is out, and John, if Sam Darnold puts up Brock Purdy numbers, it's
gonna be awkward for some people.
Between that and Royce Freeman coming back, I will just be like the most hated person globally if Sam Darnold does Brock Purdy stuff in this game.
The Royce one is particularly awesome, but yes, if Darnold can come in and do the exact same thing that Brock Purdy's been doing all season, it's gonna be awesome.
And when my Chargers sign Ray Lowry to displace Joshua Kelly from the anyway, for the 49ers, I am forced to believe, even though I recognize that it's kind of stupid probably, I am forced to believe that Sam Darnold is not a downgrade from Brock Purdy. However, there's still reason to worry that even Purdy wouldn't be able to win against this Cincinnati team that's getting better. that never should have struggled as much as it did to start the year, is all related to Burrow. And if, knock on wood, if he's getting a little better, they just rapidly get tougher. Like every like 1% in that calf getting better, it's a cascade of effects that make the Bengals improve. So it's a tough situation for the 49ers. I can't believe how quickly things have kind of changed. The tables have turned on them, but this is a difficult setup because the Bengals are a tough team, and even if your backup quarterback is good, turnover at quarterback usually is a bit of a complicating factor. So it's a dangerous spot. But with that said, I guess the tough part is I had this assumption about the 49ers defense being so great, but their lack of corner depth has clearly become a problem. Like Travarius Ward's really good, but everybody else in coverage is beatable. And I think you're seeing them kind of reaching for straws, trying to find some way. And last week their solution was like, what if we just like blitz a ton? And it wasn't getting there. And Kirk Cousins was making these throws that even he, against teams like the Bears, wasn't able to make. So it's dealing with Chase and Higgins at the same time. That pass rush needs to get to Burrow, or we have reason to believe by now that the 49ers have no answer for the question of like, how do we hide Diamador Lenoir against whatever, in this case, T. Higgins, I guess.
Yeah, right, exactly. So we have Higgins ranked as wide receiver 30 this week.
That's low, in my opinion.
It's low, but like he's been bad this year. But you figure the week off should be healthier, should be closer to 100%.
If he's T. Higgins as we know him, and if Joe Burrow is 85% of what we know Joe Burrow to be, that's too low in my opinion. Because they're not going to be able to run, in my opinion.
No, that they won't. Long day for Joe Mixon, or maybe short day. They're just not going to explore it. But I think that they definitely could take some things from what the Vikings did against the 49ers and apply them this week. So I do like the Bengals to go in there and cover. This was 5.5 at one point. Now it's just 3.5, but I still think the Bengals can stay within that, even though that number gets a lot tighter, obviously.
Yeah, I feel that one seems like a dangerous game to me, but I do think, there's a good case for the Bengals because they've kind of, I think, got a lot of answers kind of like on the horizon to the questions that they faced in the first place this year.
Yeah, if they go in and win this game, even if it's Darnold at quarterback, I think that like we start to accelerate the rate at which we forget the Bengals struggles from earlier this season. Let's wrap up. We got 2 primetime games. Neither of them expected to be overly competitive. We got the Bears and Chargers. We also got the Raiders and the Lions on Monday night. But Chargers, do you trust them to cover 8.5 or 9 points against the Bears? No, I don't either.
But they should. It's just the should is not happening that often with the Chargers, in my opinion. But I guess it's possible. Well, if Tyson Bagent's the quarterback, maybe that's
that
the
burned me in Survivor last week. I'm so distraught.
But yeah, I will say if the Bears have enough common sense to just, then run the ball, throw it to DJ Moore 10 times and run it every single other play if you can. That's the approach that they should aspire to. I just don't trust them to see it through. I can imagine them being like, okay, Tyson Bagent, time to go 4 wide. We gotta establish the pass, and that's not something you're gonna do with Tyson Bagent. But I guess I'll take the Bears to cover, especially if they give running back 1 Deontay Foreman, the workload that he clearly warrants.
Dude, saving my bacon. I have a best ball team that last week it has Austin Ekeler and Aaron Jones. My scoring running backs were Gus Edwards and Deontay Foreman. It was sick.
Yeah, and I mean it's stupid, but when Roshan Johnson's ready to go, they're probably going to snip the playing time for Foreman. But he and Herbert are so obviously their best runners. It's such a stupid debate that the whole thing is brain draining.
Yes, it is. What do you do about DJ Moore? Because obviously, like,
probably start him.
Yeah,
yes, it's not great that he's dependent on these 6-yard catches that he needs to cause another like 40 yards after the catch. But if you must ask a receiver to be in that situation and make it happen anyway, it's like Tyreek Hill and DJ Moore. Like those are the first 2 receivers, I would say. It may be AJ Brown, but like DJ Moore on just like that snatch the ball in traffic and run away from the a crowded phone booth. he is about as good at that as anybody because he'll break tackles too. He's elusive and he'll break tackles, and he's like violent snatching the ball out of the air. So I would need a really, really good receiver rotation to consider benching DJ Moore, I think.
Okay, let's get a little toss up here. Okay, so we got DJ Moore as wide receiver 28 this week, actually. So like that fringe or that strong wide receiver 3 type of option. Would you go with DJ Moore or Calvin Ridley?
I'd probably go with Ridley.
All right, good enough. I think I would as well because Trevor Lawrence is his quarterback and not Tyson Bagent.
That's the main reason, yeah.
Yeah, secret Bagent, man. Monday Night Football, Raiders, the team I'm most angry at right now, going up against the Lions. Lions 8-point favorites in this one. How much do you rinse off last week's game for the Lions, and how much of it could actually be like a problem?
Well, relative to this matchup, you ignore all of it. There's nothing pertinent to this game from the Lions versus the Ravens. In fact, even as someone who is a critic of Goff's, and I did at the last second decide no, goof game last week. When he's in his structures, when he has the protection, the cover that they tend to set up for him, that between the offensive line and Ben Johnson's play calling, keeping teams off balance on defense, those variables should all turn way back toward his favor after being completely against his favor against the Ravens. And I, as a Goff hater, say I'd be shocked if he doesn't get to 20 fantasy points in this game.
Same. I mean, if the Raiders are going to do what they did last week against the Bears,
they're going to get stomped.
They're going to get stomped.
Lions are going to just put them in the not the Lions, the sharpshooter, let's say.
Yes. And then last item on the Lions side of things, what'd you make of Jahmyr Gibbs, and where are we at with Jameson Williams right now?
Well, it was good to see Gibbs get going like that. I think Ben Johnson must have made a bit more of an effort to accommodate him because the results certainly improved in a matchup that was much tougher than any he had previously seen. That Ravens run defense is really tough. Those two linebackers, you're not going to find many better, more troubling of a matchup for running backs than those two linebackers. And that includes in pass catching, but they got him going. And it was the kind of box score that they should have been able to get with Gibbs all year. It was always laying there, in my opinion.
Right.
So maybe they were finally forced by circumstance to give him accommodation that they just were loath to in the first place. And maybe now the cat is out of the bag. I hope so, because I like Gibbs a lot, and I like Montgomery too. I just feel like there was always an imbalance there. It should be like 60% of the snaps go to Gibbs, 40 to Montgomery, and Montgomery gets all the short yardage, all the rugged carries, sure. But generally, Gibbs should be their main guy. And maybe that last week, maybe another big game here from him is the impetus for that kind of outcome. Maybe, I don't know.
Yeah, they need to keep exploring that. I mean, it was always crazy that they weren't using the guy they spent the 12th overall pick on. But I think after last week, even though it was a setup where the Ravens were kind of in garbage time and the Lions were still kind of trying to have their foot on the gas all throughout the second half, really, and deep into the fourth quarter. I think Gibbs in this setup, especially if Montgomery's out again, him against the Raiders defense,
yeah.
I mean, this could be, I think if you're doing
showdown, I hope there's fireworks. Yeah, I hope there's fireworks this time, because there should be. The Raiders suck, and Gibbs is really, really, really good. There's just no reason for him to be a afterthought the way that he was.
No, that made no sense. And but it's been established Ben Johnson well regarded as an offensive coordinator, but that was an odd blind spot for him to have through the early portion of the season. We'll see if it gets figured out in this matchup. That's going to do it for us here on this marathon of the RotoWire Fantasy Football Podcast. No, not at all. Look, there's no glossing over unless it's Jets Giants. But other than that, deep dives into every game. You gotta make a meal of it. So that's what we did. But big thanks to our sponsors over at Circa and over at the Blue Wire Network for Mario Puig. I'm John McKechnie. Thanks for listening.
Try RotoWire today, free for 10 days. Get our premium tools, rankings, analysis, and breaking news alerts. No credit card required. Go to rotowire.com/try.